Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hello, salam, and welcome to hashtag What the Patriarchy, where we strive to dismantle the patriarchy, one Muslim feminist theme or book or chapter of a book at a time. Thank you so much for watching. This is Shahnaz Haqqani. I know I haven't made a video in a long time. I've just got a lot going on in my personal life and also some exciting updates in my professional life, like a whole book that's coming out, inshallah, in the fall, in October 2024. And it turns out book writing and book editing is a lot of work. I really, truly had not anticipated how much time it would take, how much work it would take. And I really wish that authors were more appreciated. So I feel like I have a new relationship with books and with authors from this particular personal experience. So anyway, that's coming up soon. I'm also pursuing a lot of new things in my life, and I've taken up a lot of new obligations and duties that I really probably should not have at this point in my life, but I did. And I just have to make my peace with it. All of that to say, I haven't neglected my fans. I love you guys. I'm so glad that you are listening to this and watching this. I've just got a lot going on. So, but I have been wanting, especially this Ramadan, to do one good deed, and which means in this case making a video. And finally, here we are. This is it. This is my one good deed for this entire Ramadan. So thank you so much for being patient this whole time. So in this video, we are talking about gendered modesty standards, which I began talking about in my last video, which was on double standards at the beach or at the pool or when we're swimming, where patriarchy teaches men that it's totally okay to show your skin, but it's not okay for women, or it's okay for those men to force or pressure or expect or require the women of their households, or any women really, to not show any skin. Here, we're continuing that discussion, but talking about modesty standards more generally. Because have you ever noticed how traditional modesty rules and modesty standards in every single religion, in every single culture that I know of, or maybe in only patriarchal cultures, are an inconvenience only to women, but not to men? And I think they're okay. I get it. I think there are a couple of exceptions, like women being able to show more skin in certain Western patriarchal contexts where men are socially prohibited from, say, wearing short shorts, or I don't know. It's a social prohibition kind of thing. It's an expectation. Men don't wear short shorts or tight shorts. Or in sports where women must show more skin than men for the exact same sport, like tennis. Where the kind of clothing, the item of clothing is completely irrelevant to the sport. Like, again, tennis. Why do we have to show as much skin, and why do we have to wear these tiny skirts? And of course, recall white European women who were protesting at the Summer Olympics, demanding that they have the right to cover their body, and they were being fined for those protests, for wanting to cover their bodies when they were not supposed to for that particular sport, right? Because the patriarchy required that they not cover for that particular sport. But these are exceptions, but my larger point still stands that in all of these cases, the standards are patriarchal, and they are an inconvenience or a harm to women, right? It's women who are being penalized. But generally, on average, more women than men are inconvenienced. They are penalized for modesty standards. And whether it's men who are supposed to, again, say, not wear tight short or short shorts, or women who are not allowed to wear little clothing, patriarchy is the source of the prohibition or of that expectation. So let's talk about the inconvenience of patriarchal modesty standards. You see, every single woman who believes that she must be more modest than a man, or that she needs to be modest regardless of whether men are modest or not, knows how inconvenient the modesty standards are. But the issue is that when she voices this, when she points out how inconvenient these standards are, she's shamed and guilted for feeling those things, because she's supposed to be doing this for God, quote unquote, for God. If she quietly, passively just accepts this as her fate, as her role in the universe, and does exactly what she's told to do without analyzing or thinking or questioning or critiquing any of it, only then will the God of the patriarchy reward her. And a side note here, that if you pay close attention, the God of the patriarchy is literally imagined and created as an abusive, violent, controlling, vengeful, sexist man. Just like the men who use this same idea of God to threaten women, threaten us into submitting to men, to these rules. I have a whole video on how beautiful and loving and compassionate and merciful and forgiving God is, and why it is that religious patriarchy imagines God differently. You can watch that video if you're interested. I think it's called something like Creating God in the Image of an Abusive, Violent, Sexist Man, or something like that. So the women then, or the woman who knows that these standards are very inconvenient and voices this, she's told to be patient because she will be rewarded for tolerating this inconvenience. She'll be rewarded for sacrificing her comfort for what are falsely believed or claimed to be, not believed, claimed to be God's rules. But we never ask why men don't have to be patient, why men don't have to sacrifice their comfort for modesty in the ways that women do. It's like when we tell a woman who's being abused, a wife who's being abused, and we tell her, you got to be patient, sister. Right? But nobody tells a man who doesn't like his wife or who's hurting his wife to be like, you got to be patient. You can't hit her. You can't treat her like this. You got to be patient. Nobody tells men for some reason to be patient, to make the sacrifice of not hitting a woman or not mistreating a woman. We don't think or talk about why men too should just cover from head to toe if they expect or require or ask that we women do the same thing. It is as if there's something in the male body, fundamentally, biologically, inherently, intrinsically, that cannot keep a scarf on, that can't handle a scarf on the man's head, or a full body cloak, for him to wear a full body clothing all day long, an abaya, or some version of an abaya, all day long, at all times. Except, how did the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ dress again? Exactly. Have you ever wondered why the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's dress style, or the way that he dressed, isn't considered a fard or an obligation for Muslim men of all times, of all cultures, all places, everywhere? But the way that the women of Muhammad's time dressed is considered required for women of all times, everywhere, in all cultures. We have to cover our head because that's how the women of his time did it. Are you picking up a pattern here, my hearts? I really hope that you are, because there's a pattern here. When I say inconvenience, I'm talking about basic, everyday, mundane things like which spaces women who want to be modest can access, what can they wear and when, what kinds of sports they can play, where they can shop, where we can work. We have to go out of our way to exist in this world because we have internalized this idea, this patriarchal, sexist, absolutely non-Islamic idea that the world belongs to men and we as women must only exist in it if men can accommodate us in it. In Pakistan, my cousins who are required to cover themselves from head to toe and to also cover their faces when they leave the house, we're in northern Pakistan, sometimes they'll just out of sheer frustration not go to somebody's house or visit a friend or leave the house at all just because they have to pick up a pardune, what we call a pardune in Pashto, or a niqab, a full body covering, a burqa, etc., because it is so inconvenient. Men don't have to think about these issues. When I started doing Taekwondo, I was told by so many Pakistani women, so many Muslim women in general from anywhere in the world who believe that they have to be modest in a very specific way, I was told that I was lucky to not have to worry about such modesty standards because traditional patriarchal modesty standards would require that I, as a woman, not exist in mixed gender spaces or work out unnecessarily in mixed gender spaces or jump or train, do anything really. Again, just exist in a mixed gender space unless I'm covered from head to toe. So you end up missing out on something so basic, so innocent and harmless as pursuing a martial art when you really want to do it just because you can't train at just any time. But do men have to think about this? Do men have to ask, When and where can I train because I have to be modest and I can't be seen by women? Or where can I buy my clothes that are comfortable and also loose and long because it is a sin for me to wear anything else? Or what times can I train at the gym or a yoga studio or wherever else because it must only be when women aren't present because I can't be seen by women? Think also about something so basic as the way that girls are penalized, like in middle schools and high schools in the United States, for wearing tank tops or short shorts. Girls get sent home or they get expelled if they're wearing clothing that is considered inappropriate, that men are totally allowed to get away with in the same exact space. Okay, maybe not for short shorts, but or for skirts, because God forbid in a patriarchy men be allowed to wear short skirts at all. Men just dresses and skirts. Oh my gosh, that is so frowned upon. Tank tops, completely acceptable for men to do, but not acceptable for women, for girls, young girls in high schools and so on. You see, there's a lot of mental load that we as women have to carry in order to accommodate these modesty standards that are inherently designed to inconvenience us, but that benefit men. But it doesn't benefit those men who are critical of all of this, because good men do exist. Men who are critical of all of this do exist, and I know some of them. So grateful that I know some of them. And this mental load has an impact on our mental health, and by extension, our physical health. There's so much research that shows that women suffer from so many more physical illnesses and mental illnesses that could all be prevented if we stopped treating women as sex objects, y'all. If we were simply just allowed to live and exist and be whoever we want to be. If we could be our authentic selves, live our true lives. If we didn't have to constantly live for others. If we didn't have to worry about these rules and standards so much. If we didn't feel threatened to not be loved and forgiven by God if we weren't the way that the patriarchal, sexist God wants us to be. Because God only loves us conditionally and so on. So this is a really big deal, okay? Patriarchal modesty standards disrupt our worship, they disrupt our connection with God, and they create resentment in our hearts and in our souls. And that resentment is what builds up over time and really affects our mental health. And then again, by extension, our physical health. So we carry this resentment in our hearts, in our souls, in our bodies towards God, because patriarchy imagines God as a sexist, abusive monster instead of a loving, compassionate, forgiving, merciful creator and Rabb, sustainer of the world, creator of all, sustainer of all, not just of men and the patriarchy. In 2018, I went to Egypt, and in the hopes of fulfilling one of my longtime dreams to visit Al-Azhar, the famous mosque and university in Egypt, I even wore a scarf. I don't believe in that. I don't do that. And I also wore a long shirt, or I wore a shirt and jeans, or I think I was wearing jeans, I don't know, to enter this special place, okay? Al-Azhar is considered one of the most beautiful mosques in the world. But can any sacred space, any sacred site, any sacred place ever be considered beautiful or be beautiful if it objectifies any human? If it treats women as sex objects, is it really beautiful then? Because you see, the security guard or the police or whoever decides who gets to enter this mosque would not let me into the mosque, even though I was fully covered. But only because I was wearing pants and a shirt. But so were most of the men who were walking into the mosque. I was forbidden from entering the mosque and told that I have to wear an abaya or a skirt that goes on top of my jeans. They provide those for you, for women. And they have scarves and stuff as well. Yeah, not one man's worship was inconvenienced. Not one man who was entering was inconvenienced. Not one man's worship was interrupted. Not one man's life was interrupted. Not one man questioned his relationship with Islam and with God as a result of this incident. And not one man stood up to the patriarchy with me. They all saw me. People paused to see what was going on. And I was arguing with the guards saying that, why am I the only one who is forbidden to go in when all of the men are wearing the exact same thing? Why weren't they a problem? But my life was interrupted. My worship was inconvenienced and interrupted. My freedom was, of course, interrupted. I couldn't enter this mosque, and on principle, I refused to wear what they were requiring me to wear because I refused to bless and honor with my presence any sacred space, any quote unquote sacred space that sexualizes me and sees me as a sex object. Any space that sees me as a sex object that is created for the male gaze, a mosque, a sacred space, the house of God, they tell us, that facilitates men's choice not to discipline themselves sexually, but that polices what I can and cannot do inside the mosque, and completely harmless. I was completely harmless. And of course, other examples abound as well. Men being able to freely enjoy sports whenever they want, when women have to go out of their way to take advantage of opportunities like pursuing, again, any sport or just to enjoy themselves. And in swimming, don't even get me started. The double standards when it comes to swimming, summer is coming up and I'm trying to mentally prepare for what's going to happen when I go to beaches or swimming pools and I see Muslim men who are wearing shorts and whose tops are uncovered and who are wearing very little clothing. Meanwhile, the women that they're with, the Muslim women that they're with, whether girlfriend or wife or sister or whoever else, is fully covered, fully clothed. That's a sight that it's one of the saddest things in the world. I really, truly think so. But I've already done an episode on that, so you can see that video another time on your own. This, you guys, is all a form of psychological violence. To force people to dress and think a certain way and to shame them for showing skin, especially if the person who is giving these orders is a man who himself has different standards for himself. That is not Islam. That is patriarchy. And that is how you know that it is not from God, but from men who benefit from these rules, for whom these rules are a privilege. And we all know what happens when we have privilege or how privilege works, yes? We're selfish with it when we have it. Because when we share it with others, it stops being a privilege. So it's just so convenient to me that the God of these people who see women as sex objects and sexual beings in the same way that men aren't seen as sex objects. Thankfully, I don't think anybody should be seen as a sex object, to be sure. It's so convenient to me that the God of these people believes in and agrees with them, believes in these rules and agrees with these rules and agrees with these sexist patriarchal men. And that is why we have more cause to be suspicious as well. Okay, so that's all for now. With summer coming, please be mindful, please be thoughtful, please be peaceful, and please don't add more stress to the lives of women to the lives of the women in your lives. Please support us, please respect us, please let us be, leave us alone. Let us be our authentic selves and express ourselves as we want, because again, the psychological impact of telling us what to do and what not to do and constantly policing us and monitoring our behavior and what we wear and don't wear takes a mental toll on our lives, and it affects our physical health. I'm going to stop here, but we're not done talking about this. I do have a longer video coming up on this topic, where I will show that these modesty standards actually set women up for failure, for sin, for hellfire. I'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Salam.